Yo guys, what is going on? It is Invin here, and today what I am bringing to you all is a video on the brand new legendaries that have been introduced with the Brimstone Sands update, and specifically the Iliad Expedition. Now on this list, what I'm going to do, as you guys will see from the chapters or the timestamps on this video, is kind of break this down into segments. Firstly, we're going to discuss brand new legendaries that have been added to the game. We're then going to move on to some of the other legendaries you'll see further down this list that have been updated, and by this it means ones are already in the game or in other expeditions, but they've now been an updated drop. In other words, they were 500 to 600 gear score range drops and are now solidified at a 590 gear score drop, which means that you do get certain perks, and obviously that is legendary too, which is really good. So I'm going to go over those ones, and to round off the video, I'm also going to go over the Nightveil event stuff as well, because this is of course legendary patterns you can get from it, which are actually really cool looking, and they also have keen on every single one, so it's like pretty good weapons, usually with a good stat, and also they have keen on. So that's certainly something which is very cool that I'm going to cover towards the end of the video. If you guys want to see more New World content, you don't want to miss out on any of the latest news and updates, make sure you drop in a subscribe, and let's jump straight into it. Now, just to be transparent with you guys, one thing that occurred to me whilst I've been going through this video, this is kind of post-video me speaking, is that all of these items appear to be at 590 on the PTR section of New World database, and that is already giving them this legendary status. Now you'll see some of these items are 600, which is also legendary, but if we go to something like Will of the Ancients, which we know already was a 600 one right now, you'll see that 590 gear score new is legendary, and if we switch back to the old version, we can see 600 it becomes legendary. If we just go down to 591 here, you guys can see it actually switches back to epic, and that is of course the old version. So the new versions look like they are switching to legendary status at level 590, which means pretty much once you're at max expertise, if you do get a name drop, it is already going to have those 3 perks on. Now whether that will stay true once we launch into the live servers, that is another thing to cover, and if that is the case, then I will give you guys an updated breakdown of that specifically, or of course if that changes. But right now, when we're looking at this list of brand new kind of updated gear and drops that we're going to be seeing in this patch, it is worth bearing in mind, particularly when we get to some of the stuff we've already seen in previous iterations, such as the Bone Wrecker here. When I get onto this one, I will explain it a little bit more, but you guys can see it is dropped from Lazarus, but it's dropping at 590, and that's making it a legendary. So as far as I can tell from this data, it seems like any 590 or above drops are now going to be legendary if they are named, which kind of makes sense with the changes to the Umbral Shard system, which if you haven't seen, watch my video from a couple of days ago. I spoke about how they've changed that so that it now requires more Umbral Shards earlier on in the process in order to level it up, especially the early 600s and 610s plus, all the way up to 620, and then from 620 to 625 it's less. That does make more sense if now name drops are starting already with the 3 perks and the legendary status from 590, which does seem to be the case. So do bear that in mind as we're going through the video, and let's jump back on with it. The first one is of course the biggest here. Now throughout this entire video I'm going to be using New World database, and I will leave their link in the description as well, so if you guys want to check it out for yourself, you absolutely can do. Now the biggest spear here is the first one you can see. On the left hand side you can see here that it is a 29 dexterity spear, obviously 30 when it gets upgraded, and you'll see here that it has on it Corrupted Bane, Enfeebling Skewer, and Keen Speed. Now obviously it tells you on this website as well, on New World database, how much it scales with, so 90% from dex, 65% from strength, and that is when you put points into it, it's essentially the equivalent there then. And you can see where this drops from, and this one is actually from the Castrum Principium, which is one of the new elite zones in Brimstone Sands. This is the only item on the list that kind of is exclusively dropping from there, so it's worth noting and worth throwing at the start. Now the rest of these are pretty much going to be coming from the new expedition, or the Iliad. So obviously as you guys can see, this one is a 600 gear score, it's a spear, and it's called Jar of Bess. This one is 30 dex, it's got Mortal Refreshment, Vicious, and Keenly Empowered. It's not bad, it's going to be decent for PvE, but I do think that the Vicious kind of lets it down a little bit. Not many people are a big fan of that. Drops from Heru, which is the boss in mutation level 10 of the Iliad Expedition, which of course we haven't fully confirmed officially that we've got an expedition mutation coming for this, but it's fairly likely that it will either launch with it or it will come shortly after the launch, which I'm assuming we're going to get confirmed whenever the dev update video for September actually drops from New World. Now, the next one we've got here is the Hand of Jupiter. This one is actually a pretty good ice gauntlet that we can get from the Expedition, the Ennead. It's 30 in, of course, and it's got Refreshing Move, Vicious, and Plagued crits. Now, Vicious, again, not necessarily the best thing. Some people prefer Keen over Vicious, which is, of course, why the Nightveil stuff is going to be really good. But the Plagued crits is pretty decent. It's going to be decent for PvP, especially with the Refreshing Move. If people don't have a better one, it's certainly not a bad one to pick up. Now, next we're moving on to a amulet, which is called Tear of Set. This one is 24 dex or 25 dex 600 and comes with Refreshing Evasion, Health, and Divine. Again, pretty good if you are going to be running a light set specifically, because after you're dodging, you're going to be getting a lot more of these cooldowns. And with the Health and Divine on there as well, it's going to be pretty decent. You are going to be able to get healed up. Also going to be good for medium and heavy sets, but obviously the light set will get the most benefit out of the Refreshing Evasion there. And this one is dropped by Feket, which is one of the mobs in the Ennead Expedition. Next, we have the Soul Binding Band. This one is a focus ring with Refreshing, Infected, and Nature damage. Now, this is interesting because it's kind of leading down towards maybe more of a DPS style ring for a healer or life staff user with the focus on there, but of course infected with the disease that you apply, and then obviously nature damage on there as well, which is what the life staff does. With a refreshing is going to be really good, is going to give you a bit of extra damage. Refreshing on their nature damage, you can't go wrong. Decent against corrupted, so it could be a good thing to have in your back pocket as a spare ring if you do want to do a little bit more damage as a healer as well. Now, the next one we've got here is the Priestess Charm. This one is a strength earring. It comes with Refreshing Toast, Refreshing Evasion, and Nimble. So again, really, really good for those light users, particularly with the stamina regen and the Refreshing Evasion. But also the Refreshing Toast is just going to be generally helpful across the board for any sort of strength build, or any build in general, to be honest, because, of course, getting those potions up faster is always lovely. This is a particularly good one, I think, for medium and for light builds. Is also going to be decent for heavy, of course, but the medium and light are going to get the most benefit out of the Nimble and the Refreshing Evasion, particularly with the medium being able to dodge 3 times by default. This is going to be really, really good, as you'll maybe even be able to get 4 in before the bar is fully exhausted, as long as they're not continuously in succession. So this is actually a decent item, again dropped by Heru in the Ennead Expedition. The next one here, we're looking at the Staff of the Throne. This one here is a focus one with Blessed, Refreshing Move, and Keen Beacon. Personally, I think this is a very, very good drop that we're going to be seeing. Again, it's from Heru in the Ennead Expedition. Blessed is always something that you would want on a healing staff, of course. Refreshing Move is super useful, particularly because you get a lot of buffs, such as your Fortify, from doing your light and heavy attacks, as certain healer builds will use. Most healer builds will use that passive ability, so that's really good. And then Keen Beacon, when the Beacon heals a player, they gain basically a 10% critical plus chance for 6 seconds. This is going to be really crucial and is something a lot of war metas are moving towards using. So having this on the staff, I think this could be one of the new best in slots, or not necessarily best in slots, but a very sought after weapon that players are going to be grinding for. Next, we have the Claw of Orcus. Now, this one is a Int Void Gauntlet with Shirking Arcane, Life Stealing, and Keenly Empowered. I'm going to be honest, nothing absolutely amazing here, but it is an okay-ish drop. Life Stealing is not bad. Keenly Empowered is pretty good. Shirking Arcane, again, can lead to a nice bit of damage. I just don't think it's going to be best in slot for PvP. However, that being said, it is still very decent. Next, we have the Neving Staff. This one is going to be an Int Fire Staff here with Vicious, Keenly Fortified, and Refreshing Move. It's an interesting one because I really like the Refreshing Move on these sort of weapons. I think most weapons with Refreshing Move, particularly in PvE settings, is really, really good. And also in PvP, getting your abilities up more often is always a bonus. The Keenly Fortified as well, I don't know if that could really be better suited to be maybe a Keenly Jagged, but it is decent. It will keep you alive for longer, particularly when you're looking at high level mutations. And then the Vicious for extra crit damage. Again, probably more likely to prefer Keen on there, but Vicious isn't terrible. This overall is a decent fire staff, and again is dropped by Anpu in the Ennead Expedition. Now, we've seen Jar of Bess above, so we've seen that at the top. That's just the 590 variant as opposed to the 600 variant. So we'll move on to the Beast Fang. This one is a Dexterity Rapier, which has Omnidirectional Evade, Rogue, and Keen. This is actually a really, really good rapier, particularly for PvE. Again, with the Rogue on there, it's lovely. And the Omnidirectional Evade is always super useful, particularly when you are trying to kite around the mobs in higher mutations. This is going to be a really, really good weapon. Then we have the Ornament of the Legates. This one is a Strength Warhammer, and it has Mortal Power, Shirking Lightning, and Keenly Empowered. I don't think it's going to be as good as some of the other ones we already have, but it is a nice addition. Now, another thing to point out as we're going through these, if we go into LIGO, for example, they are all showing at 590, which is why they are 29 strength as opposed to the 30. But as far as we're aware, obviously you can still upgrade these to 600 and you'll then 625 and you get your plus 30 or plus 31 stats accordingly when you do get there. But because now Legendary seems to be sitting at the 590 threshold, that's why you're going to be seeing the 29 as opposed to the 30 there. But bear in mind, you obviously can upgrade it and get higher level drops too. Now, Vicious Plagued Crits keenly empowered on this one. It's not bad. Honestly, with the hatchet, this Plagued Crits is actually really, really good. The keenly empowered, again, if you're going to be going for backstabs, is great. And then them doing a little bit more damage. One thing that you do need to look at here is the crit damage multiplier is already pretty high at 1.4 on the hatchet. So actually Vicious is pretty decent. And it does have a 4% critical hit chance. So if you've got keen awareness on something like your ring, that might also be really worth stacking up with this weapon, particularly in PvE again, to do a decent amount of damage in a short amount of time, which is essentially what we want. Then we have the Charioteer's Bow. This one is Dexterity with Vorpal, Vicious, and Lasting Rain of Arrows. Again, nothing amazing, but it is decent. We next have the Bushin's Rage. This one is keenly empowered, and Leeching Shrapnel Blast. Now, this is a blunderbuss with strength on, and for the new greatsword, this could be a decent build. Obviously higher crit chance, it already has a 2% base and a 1.15 damage multiplier with plus an 11% crit chance. That is going to be a very high percentage with keenly empowered, which is going to give you empowered every time you get a crit, well, once every 10 seconds, and then the Leeching Shrapnel Blast on the back there for a bit of survivability. Particularly in PvE, I think this one is going to be very good for pumping out a good bit of damage, particularly in those boss fights. We then have the Arquebus, which is a Dexterity Musket. This one is Enchanted, Shirking Flames, and Plagued Crits. I think this one is going to be very, very good, particularly in PvE, but obviously PvP as well, with the Plagued Crits on the Musket and Enchanted. That's pretty nice. The Shirking Flame as well is also going to give additional bit of weapon damage, but I think that is going to be particularly more useful in PvE, because generally in PvP, if you're using the Musket, you're going to be sat back a little bit more, and albeit you might get attacked by ranged stuff that you can dodge to get a little bit more damage there, I think that is going to generally be more useful in the PvE environment. Then we have Sobek's Hunger. This one is a Strength Great Axe with keenly jagged, and Refreshing. Now, Refreshing as opposed to Refreshing Move is interesting there. Maybe Refreshing Move would be slightly better. However, Refreshing on max cooldown reduction by 3% almost is really, really nice. With Keen, so it gives it a nice plus 11% crit chance on top of the 3 it has by base. 1.3% crit damage multiplier, so it isn't bad for a Great Axe as well. And then Keenly Jagged, causing a bleed on crits every 7 seconds, which is really nice, with 10% of your weapon damage per second. As you can see, the base damage is pretty high on the Great Axes as well. So this is actually a pretty good weapon, and I think for PvP particularly, maybe the arenas specifically, this is going to be a very decent one to have. Then we've got the Legate's Pride, which is a Dexterity Greatsword, which comes with Corrupted Bane, Vicious, and Shirking Lightning. Now, Corrupted Bane Greatsword off the rip with this expedition, I think is going to be a nice thing that a lot of players are going to want to get hands on with. But the Vicious Shirking Lightning, it's not the most amazing thing ever. However, with the Vicious, it does give that crit damage multiplier just a little bit more power, because it's pretty low already, but the base damage is high, and actually using the Greatsword, it feels like it should be a lot higher than the stats suggest. But yeah, it's not bad. It is Corrupted Bane, which is nice, and I think it's something that you're going to need for the higher mutations, particularly for the Ennead Expedition and some of the other ones like Tempest Heart. So that's not a bad one at all if you do want to get a Corrupted Bane Greatsword. We also then have Darien Spartha. This is a strength sword with Refreshing Move, Enchanted, and Keen. In my opinion, for a DPS sword and shield player, this is a really, really good drop. You've got Refreshing Move, so you're getting all your abilities quicker. Enchanted, so that all of your attacks that are also reducing your cooldowns are doing more damage. And then a plus 11% critical chance, has a 3% by base, and then obviously 11% on top of that is actually making this pretty decent with a 1.3 multiplier, similar to the Great Axe. So this is actually a really good DPS weapon, and I think for anyone that does play it as a DPS role rather than a tanking role, this is going to be a fantastic drop to get hands on with. Now onto some of the armour that we can get dropped then. We've got the Blue Crown here, which is Shirking Fortification, Physical Aversion, and Refreshing, with a focus stat on Heavy. It's nice, but I don't know that many people that play a Heavy healer, so maybe the focus isn't that great. However, the Heavy Chestplate with Strength is very nice indeed. It has got Sturdy Energy, Shirking Fortification, and Corrupted Ward. So if you are going to be looking for a nice tank option with Strength attribute, this is going to be something you're going to want to look out for. Now then we have the simple skirt, which is a medium leg wear with dexterity, and it has shirking energy, refreshing evasion, and ancient ward. Again, if you are going for like a medium style DPS build, this could be a really good item to add to your roster with the ward on there for expeditions. Refreshing evasion again is really nice, and shirking energy, so that when you're evading stuff you are getting rewarded. In my opinion, again, for PvE, particularly high mutations, this is going to be a nice one, particularly for the Ennead with the ancient ward on there as well. Next we're looking at the honourable shoes. These are light int shoes, which have shirking, fortification, elemental aversion, and refreshing. They're quite nice. They would be a little bit better for PvP if they did have resilient on, of course. However, they are still decent, and I think for PvE they're going to be particularly good with the elemental aversion for the mutations, and obviously shirking fortification there is always a nice one to have inside, again, particularly some of the higher level mutations. Now, the final thing we have here is the Guardian's Gauntlets. These ones are heavy gloves with Constitution on, with Empowering Breaker, Physical Aversion, and Ancient Ward. Again, really good for a tanking style set. If you are looking for Ancient Ward specifically, this is a really good drop. And of course, having the Physical Aversion on there is very nice. Empowering Breaker, again, is also good. Gives you a nice stack of Empower, a little bit more damage, particularly in the boss fights. It is going to be a very useful item. Now, from the Purifier onwards on this list, these are pretty much the items that have been updated to Legendary status with the 590 change. Now, the Purifier, the Ill Whisper, the Dust Tear, the Swift Spark, the Soul Flare are all ones that you can get crafting recipes for. Obviously, you'll need the related skill, and it costs 5,000 Dynasty Materia, and it costs 1,000 Mutator Materia. These obviously can then be crafted, and I believe that they are now going to be crafted at 590 or 600, depending on what you roll it at. But again, these are just updated from this update. Like I said multiple times throughout the video, it does seem like 590 is now the Legendary cutoff. Then we have some replicas underneath this, which also can be crafted at that Legendary level now. And then we move down to some of the items that we've already seen in the game. But again, these have now been updated, so that they'll drop at 590 or above. They will already be Legendary. As you guys can see, this column is the gear score, so 590 Legendary. And then if we click into one of them, let's say the Cornerstone, for example, you will see that you will get all three of those perks at 590 gear score. So it is worth being aware of that little update. And of course, that goes throughout all of these items that we have seen in previous expeditions. So for example, this one is from the Depths mutations, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into these individually. However, it is worth noting that all of these have been updated. Now then we get onto the Nightveil stuff. Now all of this stuff here, there is one variation of each type of weapon. So one sword, one hatchet, one warhammer, one great axe, etc. And these all come with Keen On by default. Now you guys will be able to get hands on with those weapons by getting these Nightveil patterns, which again, I've made a video on the Nightveil event if you guys do want to check that out for a bit more information. But essentially killing the boss will give you the Balthazar's Ichor up here. You put that into the cauldron and you get rewards. In turn, you can use these tokens which you get as rewards to get your hands on some of the patterns, as well as these Nightveil Cauldron caches, which also can drop the patterns too. The 600 gear score ones will obviously always roll at 600 gear score. They always roll with Keen, so whichever one you get, it will always roll with Keen once you craft into it. And then two other perks as well, which are random. If we have a look on the perk buckets for the sword, for example, here you can see that there is a lot of different chances to get all of these different stuff that you would normally get, but you are guaranteed to get that Keen one, so this is really nice to know about. However, it is from the event and not as drops going forward, so it will be limited time while this event is available. But hopefully this video has been useful. There's some exciting new drops here, and especially the 590 Legendary upgrade thing is very interesting indeed. I will be very keen to see whether they change this before launch or give us some more updated information on this being 100% the case. Either way, I will bring you guys a video on that, probably after we see the dev update video. Like I said, that is likely to be where they will confirm if this is going to be an official change going into the live servers or not. But if not, it's the same difference on the information. It's just that it will need to be 600 gear score to get all three perks as we're used to. If it does stay the same as it is now, pretty much if you're at max expertise, then you will be able to get these drops already in legendary form, which is absolutely fantastic. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, be sure to drop me a like and a subscribe down below. And other than that, I'll catch you guys again very, very shortly on a brand new upload. Take care and peace.